On today's episode, I sit down with Erik Huberman. Erik is the founder of Hawke Media, Hawke Ventures, Hawke Capital, effectively creating a trifecta of businesses that enable companies to scale effectively through marketing channels. We have a super interesting discussion around all things that relate to business strategy, direction, objectives, and why we do what we do every day. I really enjoyed this one and felt that Erik has a very clear and concise way in how he focuses on investing his time where it's going to yield a return. I hope you guys enjoy this one as much as I did recording it. Hi, and welcome to Successful Scales, the show where I interview now successful professionals about their journey and try and garner insights onto any tips that can be applied to your business at home. Whether it's financial freedom or the exit of your company, wherever your journey may take you, the idea here is to simply learn from those who have done it before. I hope you enjoy and you get some value out of this. Buckle up and enjoy the episode. Erik, it's an absolute pleasure to have you sitting down here for an episode of Successful Scales. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, I mean, you have a super impressive background and you're doing some super innovative and just exciting things in the space. And, you know, I'm not going to sit here and try and describe all the things that you've achieved. You know, I probably had to click show more experiences 3 or 4 times on LinkedIn. So I'm not going to try and take that on. Tell those at home a little bit about who you are and, you know, a little bit about your story.
My story, I basically been in e-commerce for, what's it been now, like 12 years, built a couple e-commerce brands, one t-shirt subscription site, and another women's activewear brand, and sold them. And about, almost 8 years ago, sold the last company, started advising and consulting for a bunch of brands on how to grow using marketing, how to build their businesses. And, you know, worked with Red Bull, Verizon, HP, a bunch of startups. I just realized that the ecosystem around marketing is completely broken, and that when it comes time to actually execute, hiring in-house or hiring agencies, it's really tough. 99% of marketers, whether it's agency or in-house, have no idea what they're doing. And the few that are good are really expensive, have a lot of other barriers that they put up to make them hard to work with, again, on both sides. So you end up, especially SMBs end up navigating this kind of treacherous landscape of snake oil salesmen. And I just got sick of it. And so decided to hire my own little SWAT team of people I knew were really good at what they did, and went back to these companies and, frankly, for lack of a better word, put my money where my mouth was and said, hey, everything's a la carte, month to month, cheaper than hiring in-house, but we can spin up exactly what you need when you need it with people that are talented and vetted. And so that was the birth of Hawke Media. And we started it, about 7.5 years ago. And fast forward, we're like 220 people now. We manage marketing for over 600 brands. We have a venture arm. We have a financing arm. We're constantly building out other pieces of the business. We own e-commerce week with the city of LA that had 7,500 attendees last year. We hosted our first annual award show, the Brandies, launching our book not at the end of the year, but later this year. So a lot of fun things.
I said to you before we got on, you're going to see me furiously writing down. I swear to God, I don't know that I've had to write down that many things in the opening few minutes. You've got that down to an absolute T. But wow, can I just say, what an impressive background to be going from. Just starting off. I mean, you were building businesses in that sort of subscription-based model. I would say and I don't know what the landscape looks like now, but definitely at that peak of when it became a thing, and you also got out as well. I've got so many questions, and I'm losing myself even trying to comprehend just what the magnitude. 220 people, 600 brands, selling a number of businesses, building this flywheel. I mean, let's take a few steps back here. When you first got into it, and you started the first few brands here, what was sort of the vision or the mission? Looking back beyond 7 years, you've gone through now what feels like a very intentional growth phase, and you're adding on this flywheel. But early on, what was that like for you, and how has that shifted?
Yeah, I mean, early on, I was just running with what was right in front of me, like, oh, that's broken, let's fix that, or that's broken. But the mission's always been the same. It just wasn't articulated until more recently, which is accessibility to great marketing for everyone. Like, we wanted to make it super easy and accessible to get great marketing. Great is important, not just any marketing. And so we wanted to, sort of bring Fortune 500 marketing to the masses is another, buzzy way we put it, where it just, again, didn't make sense to me that these really talented marketers would only end up working with the big companies that frankly aren't as fun. Don't get me wrong. We work with some big brands. We work with some of the Fortune 100, but they're big businesses. They've already established their brand. There's not as much creativity to it. There's creativity in the campaign, but not in the overall strategy. And versus when you're with small and medium businesses, you're inventing their business along the way. It's pretty cool how you can put that together. And so the fact that those businesses that frankly needed the help weren't able to get it just seemed ridiculous to me. And so that's been the driving force of the business since. And everything we've done has been to support that, whether, again, going back to the venture arm, we invest in marketing technology that serves our clients. So things that we want to see existing that are getting started, we help finance them. We then launched our capital arm because we kept seeing working capital needs be a problem for these startups, where they'd get bogged down if it's an e-commerce brand. As they're scaling, all of a sudden they need more cash for inventory, which means they can't scale their marketing at the same rate and all these things. And it's just a constant juggling act. And then they're putting it all in credit cards at ridiculous rates. And I was like, we can definitely get this financed for cheaper. Partnered with a company out of Ireland, and we're able to put it together. And so it's just a constantly addressing where the challenges are for our clients in terms of accessibility and great. Again, those are the two words. Like, how do we make things super easy, nimble, flexible, accessible? But then also, how are we the best at what we do?
Yeah, and you'd expect someone that runs and owns a marketing agency to have the messaging very dialed in, and so having accessibility for the masses, and having that really constructive and focused niche sort of carve out, but for the masses is interesting to hear. How long did it take you to get to a stage where you sort of articulated that is the brand mission? What was that process like for you?
That mission came up, I think it's been a couple of years. So it took a while, but I've always been pretty clear on what we're doing. And we've always been pretty clear on our value proposition, but not necessarily our mission. So we've been your outsourced CMO for a long time, your outsourced CMO and marketing team. That, does connote what we do. We always talked about we're a la carte, month to month, cheaper than hiring in-house was a big part of it. So these are all terms that we've used, but that overall mission wasn't well articulated until a couple of years ago, which I would say clients seem to understand what we did. It was more employees. Employees would be like, well, I don't want to work with small businesses sometimes, and things like that we had to get much more clear on who we were as a business and our mission, so that we could attract the right people that were aligned with what we were trying to do.
Yeah, and that makes a whole lot of sense. And I think for a lot of people going through that iterative process of who are we and who do we serve and how do we add value, and it's I think you make a really good point here. It's not just about the clients; it's also about the talent. Especially when you talk about having a team of 220, you need to attract the best talent who can actually deliver on that driving mission. So, question for you is that you've been delivering on this all along, effectively in different sort of spin-offs. Your outsourced CMO and affordable solutions for the masses, et cetera. But how, if anything, has it changed over the last couple of years, in that now that you have this very, very succinct sort of brand position and message in market, has it had any or a rapid shift in terms of maybe not the output, but the culture of the business?
Yeah, and that's what I was articulating is, the internal culture definitely shifted to the positive, because people, if you don't articulate expectations with your own people, then they make up their own, and their own are almost always misaligned with yours, just because it's going to be serving what they want. And it's not, and I don't mean completely misaligned, but just as simple as articulating when you're going to do annual reviews. If you don't, then they're just going to assume that they're getting a raise every few months because you haven't told them that there's any difference. So there's things like that become, hard to, I don't want to say articulate, but hard to, if you don't give those expectations, you don't set expectations for your people, they're going to go with their own expectations, which creates a lot of friction. So as we articulated the mission, there were people that would consistently say things, and I mentioned this a second ago, hey, I just want to work with Nike and Unilever, which are clients, but I don't want to work with these other guys. And it's like, well, that's not what we're about. but I've never explained what are we about. So my expectation of them understanding that is not fair either. And so it was that constant push and pull. And so now we are very clear on it. We haven't had any problems on that. So that turned into like people seem really aligned with what we're trying to do, or they don't join or they leave. That's part of it too, is now they're clear on where they are. So instead of like whining about what they wish it was, they understand what it is and decide whether they want to be a part of that or not.
That's equally as important, is actually either saying no to or potentially employees saying no to the opportunity, because being aligned and having people who are doing what it is they want to be doing every day. You're spending most of your waking hours working with the people that you sit and come into the office with or work remotely with. So it makes no sense. And I can totally appreciate that. So, you're specifically dealing with what I would say is the largest market that is the most underserved in the SME space, particularly for a thing that, especially when you talk about small to medium businesses, it's one of the most critical functions. Is how do we actually, I would say it's the problem that the typical business struggles with most, is how do I actually get out? I built a great product, I built a great service, whatever it is that I'm building, how do I get out to the masses? You mentioned before that, you found that the industry was broken, so to speak. What are some of the tips that you'd give to people who are starting out? So whether they work with Hawke or not, what are some of the things that you think people can implement or can help impact their business in that space?
Yeah, two simple things. Don't hire anyone until you've got about 10 grand a month in marketing spend. Because until your business is at a point that you can sustain both resources and fees or salaries, don't go and get anyone. Like, no one's going to solve your problems for you as a business owner. So wait till you're at that scale. And then once you are, hire people that have been there, that have gotten to where you want to go. Because when you're hiring people to learn on your time, it's expensive. So when you're hiring, you want people that have already gotten to where you want to go and jump on board with them so that you can at least avoid, 6 months of pitfalls that a lot of people end up falling into.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, from someone who has a recruitment agency on one end and a consulting practice on the other, you can't hope to expect that you bring in, this messiah of a person and pay them, an entry-level salary and say, right, off you go, Mr. or Mrs. Marketing Manager. Teach me what you got.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I can totally relate. So you are doing a million things, right? You've got e-commerce week LA, you've got Hawke, you've got Hawke Capital, you've got a million other spin-offs that I actually didn't even write down because I couldn't physically write fast enough. How does someone like you actually manage their time? I speak to a lot of founders, and the number one thing is that I don't have enough time. I can't get to this. That's not priority. How do you effectively achieve as much as you do in a day, in a week, in a month?
I don't take a lot of breaks. It just kind of worked through. So I get a few extra hours a day than most people, which helps. Let's see. So, I mean, a constant reflection. I don't think I'm perfect at it. I think I end up spending time on things that aren't worth it too, but I try to break my time into 3 parts. So a third promotion, meaning sitting on a podcast right now, talking about like building up the name of Hawke, about a third internal, like strategically on, whether it's the core business and working with my exec team or helping systematize our corp dev strategy or building out our venture strategy, capital, et cetera. And then a third expansion, like what is next? What are we working on? Which, I name everything we have, everything that's coming down the pike. And a lot of times I basically get it up and running and then pass it on. So we have a full-time person running Hawke Capital. We have a full-time person running Hawke Ventures. We have, people in charge of all these aspects. And I push most stuff off my plate. And then I basically check in with them all on a weekly, bi-weekly basis, figure out what's going on, give them a few, thoughts from my point of view, and then talk to them again in the next couple of weeks, see that those are done, see how the progress is going, look at the challenges. And so strategic is, again, a third of my time. And so once that expansion happens, once that new initiative is up and running, it moves into that strategic bucket, so to speak.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And how intentional are you about your breakdown of your time?
Not enough. I'd say it's, I spend and I work a lot, so I have enough time. So I end up doing a lot, but there's still like my calendar. I just got a note from my assistant that my calendar is booked until late July right now. And so I'm like, all right, we probably have to move some stuff around.
Yeah, that's wild. I mean, till late July. We're recording this for anyone who watches. This is June 1st, so
Yeah.
that's pretty hefty. I want to hear more about your operation because I think, and we actually connected a while ago. I previously had worked at an agency that I believe one of your relatives had actually owned the space. I was at something massive, and so we had that weird connection. But that was a smaller agency. We grew to about 40. I'd worked at agencies that probably hit and maxed out at about that time. And yeah, we worked with huge clients like Sony and MasterCard and Mercedes-Benz, etc. But to do agency service delivery at scale, I've just got to say, as someone who spent a decade doing it and not at that scale, I mean, that is just absolutely, it's insanity to me, if I'm honest, to be able to handle that many clients and that many personnel, 220. Like, how has that evolved over time, and how do you approach building a system that is uniquely Hawke Media?
Yeah, I think part of it comes with that narrative is challenging because you hear over and over again that service businesses aren't scalable, that it's so hard to get to that stage. And every time I heard that, I'm like, but Accenture has been around 30 years and has 400,000 employees. Deloitte, EY, PwC. I know I'm naming accounting firms, but Bain, McKinsey, BCG, like there's massive, massive service businesses all over the world. And so it's doable. Like, let's just start with that. It is doable. And so when I saw that, then it's like, and I'm far from that, but getting, that's what we're aiming for towards. So whenever I see a challenge because of our scale now, I'm like, well, we better figure it the fuck out because we got 100x this. Like, we're not even close to where I want to be. And so, if I hear like we have a recruiting slow or a problem with onboarding clients because we're getting so many or whatever it is, which doesn't happen that often, but it's like, okay, well, let's solve it because we're going to have 2 times this in 6 months. So figure it out. And I would sometimes end up helping with that, but we also have a great exec team. And so it's just partially not reinventing the wheel and just try, like I try to learn a lot from others. Simple things like what's the revenue per head that Deloitte has and understanding their income and how they make money. And then looking at my business and going, okay, so I think last time I checked, Deloitte was like 160 grand a head is what their revenue is. It's like, okay, cool. So if we have something similar or better, then I don't know what Deloitte's numbers now, but let's say 300,000 people. If they can do 160 grand a head and have 300,000 people, then so can we. Because that means they have the resources with that money to scale like we want to. So it's watching that piece. And then it's just, again, watching the incremental growth that you see other agencies do. And instead of looking at timelines, I just look at stages. So like, okay, we'll do probably $35 to $40 million in revenue this year, net revenue. So that's not including pass-through, et cetera. That'll probably be closer to 250. And so if we're going to do 40 million, what are other companies, service businesses doing at this stage that helps them get scale? And you see like M&A, expansion in services, expansion in territory, expansion in platform, meaning that's where the ventures and all that comes in. Like, these are all things that have to come in. Frankly, after about 15 million in revenue, you have to start looking at different types of expansion in M&A. So you see that over and over and over and over again. And the only other nuance of it is that most companies don't even make it through that and they end up selling or getting a private equity partner or something. And so it becomes, very, very obvious. These are the moves we have to make. Now, that all comes with our core business has to be solid. We have to have a great service offering, like all the basics that aren't that basic to people. Like, all that matters is that we do good marketing for clients and serve them well and keep them. Like, that's, really the most simple part of it. But then assuming that's the case, these are all the ways you actually build off of that and scale. And that's, again, it's not, I've come to learn over the few years of running this that like no one's that smart. Like, these aren't geniuses that are building big companies. They're just, a lot of it's luck and a lot of it's hard work and a lot of it's just being smart enough. And so don't overcomplicate it. Look at what other people are doing and like, you can have your differentiator and your nuance of your business. For us, it's, this accessibility piece. And then look, because our aspirations are like the big agencies and the big consultancies. That's what we're trying to build. But our competitors are these tiny little agencies that overpromise, underdeliver, don't scale themselves, et cetera. That's who we really compete with. And so we're just trying to make a better and better moat around what we do, that it's like there's no way a small agency can compete. It's like if you had the ability to go to Ernst & Young or go to some local bookkeeper, unless you want to hide your money in the Cayman Islands, you probably should go with Ernst & Young.
Yeah. No, so it's so interesting to hear you speak about some of the businesses that we also sort of look at as I mean, again, we're not Ernst & Young, we're not Accenture, we're not Bain, we're not BCG, we're none of these things. But, truth be told, I've got a team of over 20 management consultants. More than half of them came out of EY. We took a ready-built team and we've built a process improvement consultancy focused on the SME market, specifically around e-commerce. And so, when you take assets or you look at how they are building it from within, you start to get a really good handle. Like, did you know that Accenture have 70,000 people deployed in the Philippines? You want to know how they keep their headcount, their cost per head so low? They're leveraging offshore talent.
By the way, so do we. I mean, not 70,000, but we have a small team in the Philippines. And what we realized is a lot of like the rudimentary stuff, like reporting and, task management, things like that, to some more complex stuff, is like there's no lack of intelligent people over there. We've been able to outsource to people that are, frankly, have a great attitude about it, are awesome to work with, and we overpay from Filipino standards, which means they're all pumped, and we're still saving money.
Yeah, I mean, that is our business model 101. We literally Accenture, EY, BCG, all these companies who we take talent from, they can't compete because we pay more money and we give them better opportunities. It's shooting fish in a barrel with dynamite, effectively, and they also get better opportunities. I mean, there's one thing, like one of the things, for example, when you look at these businesses, is it takes them 5 years to be a senior on a project that will actually give them access to working with client-facing opportunities. Where with us, they'll run through 3-4 projects, which might take 6 to 12 months, and then be a lead on a project, having these interactions a whole lot sooner. So it's it's another draw card. But enough about that. I am curious, because you're a guy that has very ambitious plans and are already doing a whole lot of very meaningful work and supporting a ton of businesses that need the help, and you're scaling a service business effectively. 2 questions for you, and 2 of many more to come. Trust me. I've got a long notebook here written down, but how much does data play a factor in all the decisions that you guys are making internally?
Yeah, it's all data driven. I hate running by gut and emotion. I think it's, there's a lot that goes into that. Now, sometimes if your gut is telling you something that your brain is processed faster than you can logically and rationally. So I do listen to my gut, but I analyze why. So I always look for that answer so that we're not just running on emotion. And yeah, we have a whole proprietary dashboard we've built to manage our clients. We have everything we do is data driven. It's just every decision we make, everything. If we have a problem, we go pull the data so that we can analyze the solution. It's just, that's how our culture and habits work, is we don't just go, whatever, our churn's higher on clients this month than last. Why? Well, I feel like, it's just a weird month because COVID's over and people are going outside and like maybe they're not as interested in build. It's like, no. What did we actually collect in data, and what don't we have, so that we know going forward we need this data too. So we're constantly expanding that data collection.
Yeah, love to hear that. That's how we've got a whole Kaizen team, which is constant improvement in Japanese, and we're building analytics dashboards to help manage. But I was looking for that really for validation, because I think that so many businesses, you talk about some of your competitors, indirect competitors. I think that a lot of businesses that aren't reaching 220 employees and 600 clients, they're not looking at it methodically, meticulously, mathematically. They're sort of going on that gut. And that becomes a barrier for them to sort of hit, to go through that next ceiling.
Yeah, for us, it's kind of a combination of 3 things. One is the constant incremental improvement, and looking at like solving all the little problems in the business. but then it's also constantly striving to beat ourselves from the month before, the quarter before, the year before. So I'd say those are two different things in some senses, because one is just solving small problems that come up all the time and trying to make it so that we don't have that problem again, but then also looking to be better. So that's, those two are big. And then the third one that I think a lot of businesses miss is the bigger moves. Like I think, a lot of the agencies we look at buying, et cetera, have been around for years and haven't grown. It's not because they run a bad business or even have bad processes. They just don't aim for anything higher. So it's like they are constantly improving and they have a great process, but while you're constantly improving, things are also constantly changing. So it's just a whack-a-mole kind of situation. And if you're not adding layers to the business and other things that can make money and building out a bigger platform, you're going to end up at a point where you just tread water.
Yeah, no, it makes sense, and that's perfect. You've just teed me up perfectly here. What what level of planning goes into sort of the future vision? So are you planning 3 months out, 3 years out, 10-year, your BHAG? Like, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I'd say we usually have about a year of bigger initiatives and about 3 years of goals, and that'll expand as we expand. So right now, we're pretty clear on where we want to be in 3 years, and we're pretty clear on what this year looks like in the next year looks like in getting there. Year and a half, and it's not detail, every little timeline set up. It's more just these are the bigger initiatives that we need to drive towards to start getting towards that goal.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And you've been around for
6-9 months of like detailed plans.
Yeah, and the fact that you've been in market for as long as you have, I think a lot of businesses listening here who haven't been around for 7-8 years in market and haven't expanded to this level, it's very hard for you to sort of understand, until you get to 3 years in market, you don't really have, you might be sort of I was going to use a terrible line that my dad uses, fly by night business. It's, but like right. something that really is just,
we all got to cringe and pull from our parents sometimes. It's part of life.
It's tough for me to say. It's tough. Like, you hear these things, you're like, you know what? He's got a good point. He might have been able to phrase it a little better, but the point is you need to be in market long enough to be able to project out into sort of who you are. And you hit that stage of, you're well past the stage of stability in market. You've diversified, sure. You're at scale up stage, and you have been for a while.
Yeah. And I would say, though, don't make the mistake. Like we made this mistake when we got to scale up, out of startup mode, so to speak, of like trying to be too anticipatory and like look around the corner. People love to act like they're, they have premonitions and they, saw everything coming, and it's all bullshit. Like you're all trying to figure it out. And so I actually think being reactionary in business, but quick to react, is a lot of times much more compelling than trying to predict the future. That's where you have businesses like going heavy into VR 5 years ago because it was the next thing. And it's like, yeah, it's the next thing and it'll be popular in 15 years, maybe. So like, way to go. You just wasted a shitload of money because you're trying to be futuristic. Like focus on where your business actually is at, solve the problems right in front of you, have an eye on where things are going. So you're not running in completely the wrong direction, but to adopt things early is just as bad as just throwing money to the wind.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I never thought, like, I feel like even 5 years ago, people were like, VR, it's everything. And people were literally betting their entire livelihoods on it. And you're right, we're still so far away from that being like the Oculus Rift and all those devices. They're still not, do you have one? I don't have one.
I got one as a gift. It's fun. Great boxing game. I'm just dripping sweat when I box on that thing. I shadow box for 45 minutes. It's a fun thing. But yeah, it's not, again, it's fun. I don't see it being like, especially like in marketing, it became like, we're going to make everything interactive and everything's going to be VR. And you watch these CMOs like jump on the shiny object every time there's a new, like blockchain. Everything had to be blockchain for a fucking year. And then you realize like, listen, it's compelling for some small things. Someone just brought up a really good idea with blockchain. But like the things like tracking where your food comes from, NFTs, super interesting because that's been a problem with authentication in art. Like, these are things that make sense. Blockchain to deliver me a pizza. I don't understand. Like, what are you talking about? Like, and that's, people jump on these hypes and try to force some product into their industry. And it's like, don't do that. Don't chase, like focus on where your actual opportunities are. And by the way, your opportunity might be something super old school. Like I personally think as we go back, direct mail is going to be a great marketing tool. And people were kind of baffled by it, but I'm like, no, no, no. Like people are going to be like it's something different, and
Yeah,
it's something that's
yeah, it's
worked. But
nostalgic, you know?
yeah, and TV and radio still work great. Everyone's always focused on like what's the new hot thing. And I get asked, that's one of the most common like podcast questions I get asked, like, how do you keep on top of all the change? It's like, well, first off, it's pretty prominent. Like people get their names out there. So it's not hard to look at new platforms. But basically what I do is take inventory of it. Like, cool, got it. That's a new social app, or that's this or that. And then I wait 3 years. TikTok's a good example of that. Like Musically, how long has that been around? I think it's 5, maybe more. And like now ads are starting to be decent, not even good yet because they haven't finished building their ad platform, but it's starting. And it's like, I'm glad I didn't jump into it 5 years ago. Do you know the first company to advertise on Snapchat?
The first company, yeah, Sony.
It was Sony, and then Progressive Auto Insurance.
Wow, do you know, that's funny that you mentioned that. I actually delivered with something massive, the first ever Snapchat Discover offering.
There you go.
Yeah.
But good example. From what I've heard, it didn't do anything for Sony. It was a cool test, but like that wasn't like some massive lucrative endeavor because, just to be real, Snapchat didn't have their tools built out yet to actually do well there. Like when you jump in early on a marketing perspective, you end up a lot of times just wasting money. And they got a bunch of press for being early, but that was it.
I mean, that was, I think, like when I look back at that campaign, Mashable, TechCrunch, everyone's written up about it. And that was like, how we're going to reach new millennials. Now, did it move the needle? I don't know. I don't know how many millennials out there are all of a sudden, all about James Bond. I feel like it's really dropped off. But anyway, more about you, because I find your push, and obviously I've done my due diligence here, and we're connected on LinkedIn, and I see some of the things that sort of come up, but found it super interesting that you're really pushing into marketing technology, and you're sort of doubling down on that flywheel of, I'm putting words into your mouth here, but my assumption was that it makes a whole lot of sense for you being an agency, playing in this space. What's sort of the driving vision there? Like what sort of tools, or what are you looking to pick up?
Yeah, there's a great line that a guy named Marcus Shingles gave me, who was the CEO of XPRIZE, and he was a senior partner at Deloitte running innovation there. And it was, what is the Uber to your taxi company? Like, what's going to disrupt you? What's going to, what's going to disrupt you? What's going to completely screw you up? And why aren't you building it or being a part of it? And it was like, good point. Like, I really like, that's been a driving force of what we do, because our business is going to change. And one thing that continues to disrupt us are great technologies. They either disrupt us or complement us, but either way, these things that come out that are much more beneficial to businesses than just a person doing something, whether it's better automation in email that's easier to use, so you need less time, or it's SMS marketing platform, or it's site optimization tools that do a quicker, better job, or advert creative optimization through AI, and where that can pull out because it's not as nuanced. It's just like, hey, these are the things that you should be doing based on the data we collected, like as we talked about, data driven. And so I'm not a tech guy. I've tried to manage developers. We're going to probably attempt again and build out our tech side too. It's going to be kind of nuanced and different than just building a tech company, but we realized pretty early, like, we should just invest in the tools that we're using. And really the biggest motivator of this was a company called Klaviyo, which is one of the biggest email marketing tools for e-commerce. When they were worth $5 million, they offered me to invest. And I passed because I just didn't have the money. And we've been their number one agency partner since, still to this day. We're their number one partner, and they just got valued at $4 billion. And I was the reference call for their $1 billion and $4 billion raise from their private equity partners. Like, the fact that we have that close of a relationship with a company that we watched go from nothing to 4 billion and didn't jump in was not stupid. We couldn't have at the time, but we're not doing that again. So now we're jumping in and investing. We started angel investing in a lot of our clients, partners, things like that. It went really well. And then we decided we needed to deploy more capital than we could just pull off the balance sheet. And that's when we raised a fund. And so I think we're in 13 deals out of the fund now. And honestly, like, as good as Hawke Media is doing from a personal financial standpoint, I think I'm going to make more money off venture than I will off Hawke Media's cash flow. It's like starting maybe this year or next. it's going to start being more lucrative for me to be an investor than it is operator. I like both. Neither are going anywhere. We've been offered to exit Hawke many times for more money than my grandkids would ever need, and I'm just sticking to it. But I think, and also Hawke Media helps support the venture in a way that makes it lucrative. But that's like the part of this is like, and we always talked about this with every other business I've had too. I think every entrepreneur falls into the thought of like, once this is running, think about all the big things we could do. Like you hear people talk about the data we're going to collect or the platform we're going to have. And thankfully, like Hawke Media has gotten to that point where you mentioned Hawke Capital too, which is our financing arm. We talk to over 1,000 brands a month. We end up signing, let's say 500 of those are qualified to work with us, and about 70 to 80 of them end up working with us. But that entire list is actually, I'd say more that 500 qualified list is qualified also to take a loan from us. So now we have this massive sales engine that's working for Hawke Media that now Hawke Capital can reach out to. And we just started that process, and we've already given out millions and millions of dollars in loans that we're not actually on the hook for because it's a bank backing it, that we've been able to build this thing out and create a really cool thing where companies can get cheaper financing to scale. They also a lot of times end up spending that money with us. And there's an interest component that's small, but it's still something that keeps the interest of those actually give us enough money to operate it. So it's not like some massive profitable thing from an interest basis, but we get enough fees that we can operate it and have a full-time team and all that. And then we're able to, basically manage that capital, which grows Hawke, and do all these other things. So yeah, it's been a really cool endeavor.
Yeah, I'm totally picking up what you're putting down here. I'm sort of, so I understand, right? You could sell the business, you could make more money than your grandkids would ever need. You could go down that journey, but what I'm making assumptions here, but because everything feeds the beast and builds that flywheel, then the strategic decision is to hold on to it, even if it underperformed. Let's say the value that it creates as a secondary benefit to everything else you're building, there's too much value in it. So it sounds to me like that's a little bit of the logic. And also, what would you do if you sold all your businesses today, right?
Yeah, and that came up. It's funny. Like I got offered more money than I did. There came in February, got my biggest offer yet, 9-figure offer for the business. Like we have no financing, we have no outside capital. It's 75% mine, 25% my partners, with a phantom equity pool for our employees in case we do ever decide to. And it was one of those like real moments where I called a couple people I trust that are, advisors to me, talked to my partner, talked to my wife, and went, as crazy as it is, basically when you own a business and you sell it, you have to, I got this advice from a buddy that owns a company called TaskUs that I think is IPOing right now for like $1 billion or more. And he's a brilliant guy my age, built a great business. And he just said, you got to separate yourself as an operator and an owner. And so when you look at your ownership, would you rather be an owner in your business or other businesses or real estate or other asset classes? And at times the answer is, yeah, I'd want to sell. And we've gone through the process and just not gotten what we want. And at this juncture, I was like, no, I think my best place to have my cash is in a digital agency like mine that is scaling and growing. I'm going to make way more money keeping my money in this business than I would in a piece of real estate or the market or crypto, or like I'm way more confident in the risk reward profile of where I'm at. And it's a crazy thing to think about because again, like you read so much in the news about like it's all about cashing out and the exit, and this guy had this exit and this exit, and people forget that there's the guy buying it on the other side that traditionally makes money off that, buy. So they're actually benefiting. It's kind of like Chris Rock's stand-up about like Shaq is rich. The guy that shines Shaq's check is wealthy. He's like, here, Shaq, go get some spinners. Like that was the joke, but it's like, yeah, you get rich selling a business. You get wealthy buying businesses and growing them and scaling them and figuring out financial engineering and things like that. And with a business as stable as ours now, we're buying other agencies, we're scaling it in a way that a private equity fund would. And so we have the opportunity to do what they would want to do with us anyways, but then I get to keep the value. So that's where we made the decision.
And so, I mean, you're speaking to me, as someone who I get to speak to a lot of people. I spoke to, just 2 weeks ago, I sat down with Mac Lackey, who's got exit DNA, has had 6 exits and angel invests in 75 businesses. Yep. And can't speak highly enough about him and about the course Exit DNA that he runs for anyone who's looking to understand what it actually takes to sell a business and not go to a broker or an investment bank and actually have them run it and to be educated. It's been amazingly eye-opening to me. But I think that one of the things that a lot of people don't consider is the fact that if you sell your business, let's say it's not as big as having, multi-generational wealth and, you're all good there. But for a lot of people who are looking and chasing that exit, what they don't realize is, okay, you have a $2 million exit, $5 million exit, $10 million exit. Is that going to sustain your lifestyle? Are you actually making a decision that's going to empower your life and to live the way? Because you might be pulling $100,000, $200,000 a year from that business in perpetuity for the next 20 years, and cashing out has actually been the worst decision you could have made.
And let's just take the financial point off of it. So I have a buddy that was here yesterday for my Memorial Day barbecue that he had a $50 million exit. It sounds like I didn't never know the numbers, and he mentioned it yesterday, like 50 million. And he's like, and I'm like, I asked him like, what's next? He's like, oh, I'm already working on a new business. I'm like, cool. Why? He's like, well, 50 is not enough. Like, I want to get to 100. Like, and by the way, it's never enough. That's kind of what drives people to build these things. So I'm like, it's funny because your decision can be to sell, but if you're young enough, you're going to want to go do something else anyway. So then the function becomes, do you have a new idea that you want to pursue? Because if you have a great, brilliant idea and it's time to get out, that makes sense to me. But if you don't have a better idea than the one you're currently operating, then why start over? Why not just keep building? Because for me, if I work really hard this year, I'll make, double what we did last year, an extra $20+ million, versus I can start over and I can work my ass off. I might do 1 or 2 or 3 or 5, so I have an opportunity with my own business to increase by 20 or to start a new thing. And if I'm incredible, get to 5 or something. Like the amount of scale I have that now even incremental growth can be so impactful. It's just, again, it's a better use of my time, and it's more fun. Once you get to the point of running a business where you have a great exec team and you have a lot delegated, and you can, again, my focus is 3rd promotional, a 3rd strategic, a 3rd expansion. That's a role I created for myself that I like, that it's like, I'm not working towards anything anymore. Now there's still nuance in that like I'll lose an executive or I'll have to change something up, et cetera. And so there will be times where I have to not quite stick to that just because there's more urgent matters. But generally that's what I'm striving to. And I'd say like I get more and more, I get closer and closer to that being my permanent stay, and it sounds like it may get redundant. It doesn't, because being strategic in your business, everything, the strategic moves are always different. Expansion, always different. Promotion, kind of redundant, but it's fun. So
no, I mean, you're really speaking like, I spoke to another guy, Nick Bradley, had 24 exits. He's got a podcast called Scale Up Your Business. Sat down with him, and when we were chatting, I think off record, he was explaining to me that, a lot of these people have these sort of pipe dreams of starting a technology company, building a unicorn and going through this whole process of capital raising. He said that you would be shocked at the number of people that never make it. It's most, firstly.
Yeah.
And he said, people who are acquiring businesses, working in the private equity, M&A, VC space, and actually doing the acquisitions, scaling up, rolling them up, and then selling or IPOing to strategics or private equity are so much more successful. And, I mean, take yourself back 7 years, right? When you just started Hawke Media, think about how fucking hard that was to get it all started and going through that whole process. Like, would you ever really want to do that from day zero again?
And that's the truth, is probably not, unless I get really fucking bored. And then I just but I don't see that happening, because that's the other piece, is like life progresses. Like by the time I would get to that point that I might start something new, I'll have kids. I'll have there's a lot coming down the pipe. I'm married now, and those are probably in the near future. And you get to a point where it's like, no, I don't want to work 18-hour days for a year to make a little bit of money to get off the ground. That is something that is great to do in your 20s. And I do believe most should do it and learn that work ethic. But there gets a point where it's like, I want the option to do that, but I want the option to also go take a week with my family and go do something. And that's hard in the beginning. It's really hard. And what ends up happening from what I've seen is when you have an exit and then start your second business, a lot of people throw money at problems they would have normally spent time on, and you end up just blowing a bunch of money.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking to someone who's literally started the business less than 2 years ago and is just moving past, we built a multi-million-dollar business now inside of about 18 months. We've got a a team, we're still evolving, but like, fuck, I'm not looking to go 18 months back. I'm not even looking to go 3 months back. Like there's a better way. And I realize that now.
Yeah. And I think there comes a point, like, again, you have your platform, and even if you did sell this for enough money, then you probably would change what you're doing, and you'd want to build something else, but you're not going to have the fight in you. It's, was it Conor McGregor sleeping on silk sheets thing? Like that, he started sleeping on silk sheets. He lost the fight. Like, it's like, that is when you've been successful, it is really hard to grind again. I work just as hard not just as hard, but close to just as hard as I always did. Like, I still put in the time, but the type of work is so much more sustainable. Like, I'm putting in the time, which is why I always love when people say, like, I got where I was from hard work. It's like, we have the same amount of hours in a day. Like, fuck them.
It's the great equalizer, mate.
Yeah, it really is. So there's everyone works hard. That's just a baseline. Like, that's easy. So I still work hard, but it's different. It's meeting with other people. It's making big moves. It's one of my closest friends said this to me. We worked in real estate together in 2008 and 9, like worst time in history to work in real estate. Yeah. And he mentioned something that he's like, we're both trying to get from the sprint to the stride, which has always resonated with me, from the like hustle. And I hate hustle culture. Like, just work hard because it's not scalable, to like big deal, because the hustle is being handled. And that's where I think most business owners need to aspire to be, is like, if you're required on a daily basis and you have to work hard to maintain, you're fucked. You're never going to grow. But if you can get it to a point where the thing kind of hums along without you, and then you can be additive, that's where it's all more fun and more scalable and more sustainable. And that has been what we've fought, meaning my partner and I have fought to create at Hawke for a long time, and have it pretty much there. There's always nuance to that, but it's getting there.
Yeah, listen, you're taking the words right out of my mouth. There's nothing I hate more than that hustle culture, and like, wearing the number of hours you did as a badge of honor. Like, what moron starts a business only to work 80, 90 hours a week and say like, yeah, look at what I'm doing. Like, yeah, there's a period to work like that if you have to. If you get to a stage where you're at right now, and I'm curious to know sort of when that transition point is, but you, you're a guy who's working smart, right? You've broken your objectives down into thirds. You're strategic. You've got operationally savvy people running each of the businesses and doing all those things. How long did it take you to get to that moment where you're like, right, I'm in my stride now?
Oof. So yeah, it wasn't like some turning point. There were a few. From the beginning, I brought in someone that became my business partner that was like, you focus on growth, I'll focus on like delivering. And so my COO, my partner, he's been always like had my back, so to speak, so I could toss things over and he'd get them handled. And then obviously that scaled from just him, but that was the first step. A big one came 3.5 years in. This is the most ridiculous but true story. I took my wife to the south of France in Monaco for her 30th. And we had friends that we could stay with and stuff like that. So we're sitting overlooking the Monaco Grand Prix, looking at the multi-$100 million yachts. And not that I ever want one, but I was like, the way I'm working right now, like, I'll never get that. We were about a $5 million business a year before pacing to be a 10. And I was like, there's just no way with what I'm doing that I'll get there. And so I literally right there decided I'm not the salesperson anymore. I was still selling 85, 90% of our business. And I was like, I'm not doing it anymore. So I passed everything off to our salespeople. We dipped July and August of that year. It was this past weekend, actually, 2017. Came back, June, July, we dipped. August, we started to recover. And then it forced me to create a sales team that could actually sustain the business versus me being the one to do it. And so some of these sort of Band-Aid rips where you just that's it, we're done, I've done a few times. And now we're trying to do it with our exec team. And we're, slowly teetering on, you guys need to learn how to, these are the company goals. These are your own goals. You need to manage them. And the closer and closer we can get to going, you've just got it. Like, it's not, we have a great exec team. So anything I say here is not like demeaning them, but like, when they miss something or do something, it's like, okay, but you got to go fix that. I need to be able to rely that you're just going to get the job done and get the results done. Whatever that takes, you've got it. And there's going to be nuance in there, because there's no, you can't just create, if I came in and said, the goal is $1 billion this year, go, it's just not possible. But so there's things that happen in there, but it's not going to be because of their lack strategy, their lack of ideas, or lack of effort. Like, we're going to march towards these goals that we have, that we've agreed to. And I think, that's going to be the next step of like, if they can get to that point, then I can truly be just additive and work with them. And that's, again, where I pretty much am. The only piece we're missing really is a head of marketing, which we've been hiring for a little while.
It's the notoriously hardest one, I feel, to fail to fill as well. Like, I've been looking since day one as well. And yeah, it's tough, mate, especially when you are a marketing agency and you've got all the tools in your toolkit. It can be almost intimidating for some people to even consider applying. But I've been cognizant of time, and I could sit and chat with you here for hours, my friend. Really, this is great stuff, and I feel like I'm learning a lot. Just being able to have a high level conversation about a whole lot of different areas around what it is to grow a business. But before I let you go, what's the best way for anyone listening out to get in touch, either with any one of the number of solutions that might help them grow their business, or with you personally? What's the best way?
Yeah, any social media channel @/Erik Huberman. Super easy. Or if you want to just work with Hawke, you can just go to hawkemedia.com. It's HAWKE media, and sign up, and we'll do a free audit for anyone that wants us to dive in and see where their opportunities are.
Awesome. Well, Erik, mate, it's been a pleasure, really. I cannot believe, I was looking up at the clock and I just can't believe how quickly it's flown by. So yeah, super stimulated. But again, thank you for taking the time and sitting down with me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.